Welcome to the HR Think Tank, a podcast that uncovers the power a trusted workforce has on team performance, culture, and morale. We gather insights from experts, business leaders, and HR professionals to help you lead your team. Here's your host, Kai No, CEO and co-founder of Verify Now.
There's a direct correlation between a company's ability to attract, retain, and nurture high-caliber talent and its bottom line. Having the right people is critical to the success of your business and to provide value to your key stakeholders. So how do you approach recruitment for high-value talent? Our guest today specialises in proactive talent acquisition to meet immediate and long-term strategic hiring needs. Combined with a genuine interest in people and understanding their drives and motivation, it's no surprise she has a great track record with the recruitment of high-value talent. Ronel Raats is a partner at Sales Recruit Partners, a recruitment company with a reputation for accessing proven B2B sales professionals and sales leaders in Australia and APAC. Welcome to the show, Ronel.
Thank you so much, Kai. Happy to be here today.
Yeah, thanks for coming on and talking to us about high-value talent recruitment essentials. So the first question I have for you is, what key trends have you noticed in the industry?
A couple of trends that I've seen is that, talking about COVID, is that there's definitely a global talent pool. There are a lot of roles that can be work from home. And I think from a company perspective and candidate perspective, it really expands the candidates in the pool and the companies that could be considered for those candidates. And so that's probably the biggest trend. It creates a lot more diversity. The second thing is just on the back of diversity. So diversity and inclusion, I think, has become a far bigger part of our work life now. This drives not just, I work for, but I work with, or I am part of this bigger business. It actually creates loyalty, and it creates synergies and partnerships that, maybe does lack in certain, companies. The other thing that it does as well, it minimizes biases. The third thing, I think, is the candidate experience. There are a lot more opportunities available than what there are available talent. I think, companies do take far bigger step towards, streamlining their hiring processes. And if I can call it the candidate relationship management aspect of that process.
Let's chat about the executive or high-value recruitment essentials. What's involved in an effective search process for high-value talent?
There's a couple of aspects that I look at. So the first would be pre-search. When I talk about pre-search, is that the preparation work that goes into identifying what talent do we need, what does our talent attraction strategy look like, and there's a couple of factors that you consider in the process. Is that know your business, so know your team, know your culture, know what kind of personality profile is going to fit in with your business. The second thing would be have some clarity around not just the job description. So a lot of companies think, we've got a job description, now we're set to go. But there's so much more that needs to be considered, outside of the job description. So look at what are we hoping to achieve from the hire. And if I can relate it back to sales, which is probably the easiest thing to do, is say, if you're recruiting a sales role, you're going to want to understand what personality that person needs to have to fit into our business and represent our brand. The second thing is, how does that personality work with your customer base? So what are they expecting and what does that need to look like? The third thing would be, what are we hoping to achieve in the market? So yes, the person's going to sell, but are we focused on retention of existing customers? Are we focused on acquisition of new customers? And then aside from that, I guess going a step further to say, what does those results need to look like if we want success in this role within the next 6, 12, 18, 24 months? And so have that, I guess, really planned out so that when you screen, you've got clarity in terms of what capability that candidate needs to come with. So you can, later on, you'll see that, is used within the rest of the process. Yep. The second thing we look at then is, why must a candidate join our company? So bringing it back to that employer branding, really put, I guess, a little bit of a positioning strategy together and say, this is why us, this is why you should join us. This is what your journey going to look like over the next, 2 to 3 years with us. and I guess help you stand out against some of your other competitors, because that journey will differ. Even if it's exactly the same industry, the journey will differ in depending on the business and where they are in the life cycle of their growth. The second step in the process is in search. What I mean by that is, certainly we've seen an increase in opportunities that require search because of the lack of talent in the market. And so working with an experienced search partner that understands the market, number one, and number two, I would say got a really thorough process to uncover talent in the market, to identify the candidate's needs and make an alignment with what the business has got to offer, so that there's benefit to both in the process. The other thing that's really important to mention within search is that if a company partners with an executive recruitment firm, be transparent, because that transparency will create accuracy in finding the right candidate for your business. I would say warts and all, there's no company that's a 10 out of 10. There's no candidate that's a 10 out of 10. But find the areas that you can compromise on, and find the ones where you think, well, I can actually develop this. If somebody joins my business, this is what I can develop. And make sure that you start the search early, because it will take time.
Have you ever given feedback to a client to say, hey, perhaps you need to have a look at your recruitment process and expectations? Like, how have those conversations gone?
I think, Kai, it's the way that it's delivered, right? At the end of the day, we're working together to find the best talent in the market. And I'm not working in isolation. I'm working in partnership with the business to say, well, let's help you be successful in the process. And if that means that maybe we tweak things here and there to ensure that success, that's really what we're driving, to be quite honest. And by the time that companies come to me, a couple of things. Either they've worked with us before, so they'll just continue working on that search basis, or, they've gone to market and have been unsuccessful in finding the right candidates, or they've placed the role a couple of times but haven't really found a good match. So typically they don't come to me without a real big problem, and then it's critical roles. So I think they value that we're working in partnership, and it's constant and consistent dialogue. It's feedback from the market. I'll give you an example. So I was working with a company in the services space, industrial services space, and we found that what they were looking in the market, there was just some inconsistencies with the scope of the role and capability of candidates, and it is a very small market. You need to create the opportunity to discuss that feedback and say, this is what we found in the market. And that's, I guess, the great thing about having somebody in the market that can come back to you and say, maybe we need to relook at it, and at the end of the day, ensure success of the placement. And that means maybe changing the scope of the role, maybe changing the salary, maybe changing the location of the role. So lots of different elements that can be considered. The other thing I want to mention is that typically what happens in traditional interview process is that when a headhunter does an internal interview with the candidate, they take the time to, understand their experience in detail. Yeah. My advice always to companies is leverage that, so that your first interview with a candidate is more productive. For sure, you want to get, there's elements that you want to get a greater understanding of, but don't redo the recruiter's interview. Do the prep, understand what you're looking at in terms of capability and the candidate. I almost always recommend, either a 40-60 split. What I mean by that is focus on the candidate, their experience, how that could potentially transfer into your business, because you want to really understand what environments they've been exposed to, assess culture fit, and get a deeper understanding of personality. And the other 60 or 50% is really talk about this role. Talk about your company, talk about this opportunity, talk about what it is that you want to achieve. And the minute that you do that, it's a far more productive interview for you both to identify whether there's enough in it to pursue to that next step. Yeah. But from a candidate's perspective, with confidence, they can say, this is why I want this role.
Let's talk about the candidate experience in a little bit more detail. I've got a few questions around this, and I'm just going to throw it at you. How do you develop trust with, say, senior or executive candidates? Is that different to your more generalist or high volume positions?
No, I mean, I think that there's definitely some intricacies that differentiate, but I think essentially my view is that every person needs to be respected, and every candidate that you talk to needs to be understood, because if you don't understand the motivations for that candidate wanting to make a change, if you don't understand what are their career drivers, if you don't understand what are they working towards, and you don't understand where their value sits, most likely you're not going to be very accurate in putting a role where they can leverage their skills and abilities and grow professionally. And so I would say that, and that whether the person's just starting out or whether the person's more experienced, obviously their dreams will be different. The expertise will be different. So there's going to be differences in that. But for me, it's the same approach.
Okay.
I would literally, whether I'm recruiting somebody, even though I'm not doing that now, that's maybe second year in the workplace and, they're looking for a change, or somebody that's, a CEO of an organization looking for something different. And typically those aspirations will be different, because they're different places in their career life cycle. But it's taking the time to understand that. And the candidate journey is not just what the candidate experiences in the engagement with the company, but also with the recruiter. Whether that recruiter has got a really good sense of who they are, what they want before they present them to an opportunity. I speak to a lot of candidates that say, somebody's called me for this role, but it really doesn't, they weren't even interested in understanding what I wanted. They wanted to sell me the job.
Okay.
And, I think about the candidate journey from the minute that you get the role, the way that you approach a candidate, just even simple things like if you've made a call or set up a call, phone. If you can't phone, make an alternative plan, but respect their time throughout the process. And that will also help build a fantastic network. Even if this is not the right role for that candidate, then the next time they are ready to move or that you have the right thing, they'll take a call from you. And it's the same for the company, right? If the candidate journey is great, your interview process is streamlined, you've taken the time to share your business and, be transparent in the interview process. Even if it's not the right candidate today, you don't know what's going to come around 5 years from now. And so that may help you get that candidate.
I think you've got a wonderful approach to relationship management. We've spoken about it before. You're really invested in long term, and you try to look at the values and you try to look at the interest alignment. You're not trying to fit someone who shouldn't be in that job because they're not in it for the right reasons. I guess in your role, the success is not just about placing that bum on that seat. It's about ensuring they are successful in the long run and are making a significant or a meaningful contribution to the company that you've placed them for.
Absolutely. And I think you've said the right thing is, it's not just what contribution they make, but are they growing professionally? And the minute somebody is growing professionally, they're being stretched, they're out of their comfort zone, we know that provides challenge. And it's not, it's not just whether they're successful that tells you this person is happy in their role. It's, are we touching base with candidates more often so we can understand whether they're in the right place right now? Because 2 years in from making that step, they may be ready for something else.
What are some tips you have for employers or hiring managers when it comes to pre-screening high-value candidates?
So pre-screening, if you're working with a search partner, that's what they're there for. And so I would say if you're working with a partner, pre-screening will not be part of the company's, responsibility. It's the recruiter's responsibility. And what a recruiter does in that process is they would then identify, what are the things that we are screening for. And when they present the candidate, discuss alignment with those aspects so that role is really already taken care of. When it's a first interview, if we move to first interview, which would be the company's responsibility, I would say, probably the biggest area to focus on would be to identify whether a candidate can actually be a good cultural fit. So look for the soft skills, look for the personality, look for attitude.
How do you assess that though when you've only got, say, 30 minutes or an hour in an interview?
So I would say most, senior roles, you're not spending 30 minutes with the candidate. You should be spending, between an hour and a half with the candidate. And it's got to do with what that interaction looks like, how enthusiastic the candidate is, how much preparation they've done, coming into this call with you, they have a good understanding of your business. It talks, and this reflects to their career drivers. It reflects to, especially if you look at sales, what can you expect before they will see a customer? They will do, the preparation. They will understand the business. They will go in prepared. So it tells you a lot about the candidate. And then you want to understand their motivations for wanting to leave their current environment, motivations for wanting this role, or drivers, career drivers. What are they working towards? Yeah. And through this kind of, conversation and dialogue, you're able to get a bit of an understanding of, the person. In addition to that, I would also do assessments, so whether it is, Lumina or Myers-Briggs or any assessment that the company feels comfortable with, it just gives you an extra bit of insight in personality.
Let's say you've successfully recruited for the client. Let's talk about what's next. What are some of the key actions companies can take to ensure this new recruit is in the best position to succeed?
Yeah, I love that you brought that up, because for me, that's a big focus now, especially if you link it back to what we discussed earlier on the trends in the market. It's a retention-focused hiring. So the only way that you can do that successfully is if you have a plan when the person starts. How will you set that person up for success? Cohesion and a thorough onboarding plan. It's what you do. It's, giving them information about your business, the people in the organization, how you operate, your market, your customers, your challenges, and then allowing an opportunity for that person to bring in their skills and abilities to overcome that, but lay the foundation so that, they can see that you're actually invested in their success. For me, this is a big aspect of it, along obviously with, a really well thought out talent management plan. Post onboarding, how will we actually retain this talent in our business? What can we do to get longevity in placement and retain that talent?
What are some things that you've seen work well? Because obviously retention is more cost effective than recruiting every 12 months.
Oh, absolutely.
So, talk to us about what you've seen as being effective talent development.
So I would say the first thing that comes to mind is demand that your line leaders are accountable for spotting, developing, and retaining talent, because that, immediate hiring manager can see the most visibility on the candidate, what they are capable of, where are the areas of development, have constant conversations about what they enjoy about the role, where is their growth, what more do they want to do, and facilitate an environment where candidates are going to feel comfortable to say, I want to put my hand up for this because I'm really interested in that area of the business. Or, a year down the line, I am looking at, expanding my skills and abilities in the leadership side to give them an opportunity to participate in coaching. Have that development opportunities come up so that in 2 years' time, you have a person that's more capable of, and you could potentially move him or her into other areas of your business. Talent policies needs to be built solidly, but they also need to have an element of agility to review it constantly, to say, what are we doing? Where are we missing the boat?
That's an excellent point, because I wanted to ask you.
Absolutely.
I wanted to ask you around the role of performance management to not only ensure employee fit, but is to keep this eye on talent development. So just keep talking to us about this.
So understand, for instance, where is the gap? If you're on top of what they're doing well, you're also going to be on top of what they're not doing well. And then identify ways where you can develop those capabilities. Companies sometimes, and it's good and bad, sometimes they have people in a role for a year without real performance.
Yeah.
The challenge with that, it's disheartening for the company because they feel like I'm investing everything in this candidate. It's disheartening for the candidate because the candidate clearly feels like, well, I'm not getting up to speed. Yeah. Have conversations. And if a person is a good fit for your business, see if you can find another place for him in your organization. Yeah. If you see that a person is not in the right place right now, do something else with that talent.
Well, this has happened in our company, actually. So, we've placed people in roles and they did well for the first 3 months, and then you just see the performance drop off, right? But in terms of the person's alignment with the company culture and where we want to go, there was good alignment. So I guess from a management perspective, rather than saying, oh, look, you're not doing this well, we had those conversations with the individual to say, what else, what's going on in your life? What other things can we help you with? We redeployed them into a different position, and they have been going so well. We've really seen that turnaround. The employee satisfaction is right up, and their productivity is like some of the top. And that's because we were able to have those conversations. So I think it's really important to have it openly and clearly. And I think something one of our earlier guests said was clear feedback is actually fair feedback.
Absolutely. I mean, I came from an environment where we had the 360 recruitment performance review, and 360 performance reviews can be very harsh because it just, eliminates everything. Yeah. But if you have a culture of, that learner's mindset, let's grow together, candidates will also not feel like, well, I'm always under scrutiny, if you like, and I need to fit into this box, and so sometimes they'll just stick it out because they feel like, well, I'm actually okay at this. But by having conversations and really transparent and clear conversations, you can identify what's missing in that person's ability to just take that next step up or be more successful at what they're doing.
And sometimes despite your efforts, sometimes it just doesn't work out. So that leads us to one of our last points, which is around exit management, offboarding, but specifically for this high value talent pool. What does that look like? How important is this part of the process?
Yeah, there's a couple of aspects to this. Again, these topics that we discussed today are very big topics. It's got many different elements to each of those, and they're very much dependent on the specific situations. But I think if you are thorough in your interview process and you have partnered with somebody that really understands the market, your ability to attract the right talent immediately increases. And the idea is always, how can we be more effective at the recruitment process so that we are in a better position post-hire? And so this also means that, the idea is that we recruit for longevity. But like you said, it doesn't always work out. And there's a couple of things that companies can do to manage this effectively. The first would be really through that first 3, 6, 9, 12 months time, have very clear objectives in place so that everybody knows what they're working towards. And sometimes what happens is that candidates miss the boat, perceived they missed the boat, and then they haven't really delivered what was expected. But in some cases, those expectations were never made clear. So the candidate joins without clear expectations, then, it seems that they haven't worked out, but clearly there's been a very big lack of communication in that process. So that's the first thing you can do, is that proper onboarding. Let's put expectations out. Let's understand, what are we measuring to show success. The second thing you can do is, if it still does not work out, react sooner rather than later. Because if somebody in a leadership role doesn't work out, In some cases, I guess the company also have to manage their expectations around, how long does a person need to be in the role to show their value. But, in the end, if it doesn't work out, the negative effects to the business, obviously, there's lots of negative effects. It's the motivation of the people in the team. It completely changes the dynamic. If somebody is not doing well in their role and they're not happy, everybody else in there, that's in contact with them would be affected.
Particularly if it's a
by
senior
that.
hire and, this person's come in to make some wholesale changes on the business and have said, let's go on this journey together. And then, 9 months later, it's like, oh, I'm hopping off this bus.
Exactly. It's obviously that it's productivity levels that would drop because people not motivated. They don't want to be reporting to this person. You could see some of your really successful candidates in the business leave and move on because the leadership is such an important part of their decision making to stick around. And of course, it also has an effect on the reputation of your brand and the market.
Yeah.
So there's a couple of reasons why you need to react sooner rather than later. And if you do, be very clear about what has and hasn't been met in terms of expectations. The other thing that you can do is definitely do the exit interview. Exit interviews, we know it's never a one-sided thing. When things don't work out, it's never one-sided. There's always elements from both parties that influence that outcome. Getting a really good understanding of the candidate's experience and journey, what they felt, their perspective of what has and hasn't worked out. And it gives you an opportunity to reflect and redirect on the next time that you're going to do that same hire. And that I guess will give you an opportunity to get it right the next time and be more effective at holding on to that person.
Great. Thank you. That was really well said, really well put. So I can see that being a piece there for people. Sometimes people are so quick to get someone out the door, they don't even think about what they could have learned from the process. They're just like, you know what, this person wasn't great. Let's just shoo them off as soon as possible. But I think you've got to step up. You've got to rise above, I guess, the ego bruising that you may have experienced to actually see what you've learned from it so you can improve and you don't get it again. Now, before we wrap up, Ronel, because it's been a fascinating conversation, I think you've provided some great tips and examples for us. I want to do the Fast 5 questions with you. It's an opportunity for us to get to know you a little bit better. Are you okay if we do it now?
Yes. Let's do it.
Ronel, what was your first job?
So first job was, I was a nanny for 3 years overseas. And then my first corporate role, I was an admin assistant in a shipping and logistics company.
What's something interesting that's not on your CV?
I'm a lifelong learner. I am continuously upskilling. I'm doing courses left, right, and centre as much as I can, as often as I can, even when I'm very busy. And I'm an addictive reader when it comes to crime novels.
Okay. Well, just in terms of the course, I guess I'll ask you about that more after. What advice would you give your 18-year-old self?
You don't have to have it all figured out, because when we're 18, we just don't know enough about ourselves sometimes. We've got all of these pressures and influences. So just give yourself a break, take a breather and make a call. But know that it may not be, it may not always end up where you started.
What book is a must read or what movie is a must watch?
Okay, so must read. Got it here. It's called From Good to Great by Jim Collins. So what I like about this book, it's quite an old book now. It's 2001, I think he wrote it. It really gives us great perspective of companies that made it. The companies that made the leap and been extremely successful, and companies that didn't. Okay. And they took, I guess, in the research, they considered over 1,000 companies, and they ended up with 10. And it talks about their leadership style, the hedgehog concept. And what I mean by that is, helping companies define their purpose and how to leverage that to become great. It also gives, just great information of how do we figure this out.
I'm going to read it. I need it. I'm at that part in my life where, I want to go from good to great. So,
and it's also got grades around talent management, how to develop that purpose, how to develop fantastic leadership. And this is what helps us build great businesses.
And last question, what's a job for the future that doesn't exist today?
Oh, I love that. So I don't know specific titles, but I think it would have to be something to do with AI. Like, I think just the ethical side of AI. We're in very uncharted territory, and that I definitely see that as, some jobs around those aspects. And especially if you look at, how important STEM subjects have become in our education now, we really are educating our kids for that, market and industry.
Ronel, thank you so much for joining us. Thank you so much for your flexibility. You're actually our first remote guest. First of many, I hope. So I really appreciate your time today.
Oh, thank you so much, Kai. I enjoyed the conversation, and it was fun.
Our guest today was Ronel Raats from Sales Recruit Partners. She has over 20 years of international experience in recruitment and management consulting. She strives for excellence and is passionate about adding value, driving change, and delivering practical solutions that result in positive commercial outcomes. If you have any follow-up questions about today's discussion, you can connect with Ronel via LinkedIn.
Thanks for listening to the HR Think Tank with Kai No. We'd love it if you could subscribe and share our podcast with your network. As always, the resources and links mentioned will be included in the show notes and posted on the Verify Now website, verifynow.com.au.